I believe that Andrew and Meghan have crossed paths. Why did they protect Andrew? And it might be because Andrew could have fired back and said that he does, in fact, know Meghan. It could be a real tit for tat moment for them.
The Yorks have always been protected by Harry and Meghan, but I think the gloves are about to come off. Harry and Meghan are said to be watching developments extremely closely. They are acutely aware that a memoir of that scale would inevitably revisit the most contentious chapters of recent royal history, and they are anxious about how their actions and private exchanges might be framed.
There's a question that's been hanging over the Sussex story for years, so obvious, so glaring, that the silence around it speaks volumes. Why did Harry and Meghan never go after Prince Andrew? Think about that for a second. These are two people who wrote one of the most explosive royal memoirs in living memory, naming names, recounting private conversations, airing grievances that had been building for years. They sat across from Oprah and made accusations that shook the monarchy to its core. They sued British newspapers. They gave interview after interview detailing their pain, their persecution, their version of events. And yet, through all of it, when it came to Andrew, the Duke of York, a man whose reputation has been publicly destroyed, Harry and Meghan said almost nothing. One paragraph in Spare. One. And even that wasn't about Andrew. It was about Harry's own security arrangements, a complaint about himself, not an attempt to expose his uncle. So why the silence? Why, when they were willing to burn so many other bridges so publicly and completely, did the Sussexes draw the line at Andrew? What exactly did they know? And more importantly, what did Andrew know about them? Those questions, which simmered quietly in the background for a long time, have suddenly become very urgent. Because something has shifted.
Ferguson has never been known for diplomatic phrasing or softening her opinions for the sake of harmony. She tends to speak plainly and emotionally about her experiences. That unpredictability, the sense that she might be candid to the point of discomfort, is precisely what is unsettling the Sussexes and indeed the entire British royal family.
Something that could change everything, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the entire British royal family, is now in motion. And the person at the centre of it all is a woman who has spent nearly 3 decades being underestimated, overlooked, and written off. Sarah Ferguson is preparing to write a book, and the people most terrified by that prospect aren't the courtiers at Buckingham Palace. They're not the king's advisors. They're not even the senior members of the firm who've spent years containing one scandal after another. No, the people most terrified by what Sarah Ferguson might put to paper are Harry and Meghan themselves, and that tells you everything.
Fergie is preparing to go nuclear, to drop the bomb that for a long time she has resisted as she grifts for money from whoever is likely to give her a handout. But all of a sudden, as she is completely marginalised, both by the business community, the entertainment community, and the British royal family, she knows the way for the big payday is a Prince Harry-style autobiography.
The mainstream media have not reported on the fact Meghan Markle was friends with Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. That is a fact. They had been on holiday together. There are numerous pictures of them on a yacht holiday. So the fact the press have never mentioned this, and the mainstream media continue to offer some very questionable protection to the facts, this rings my alarm bells massively.
To understand why this matters, you have to understand where things stand right now. The British royal family is navigating one of the most turbulent stretches in modern history. The Sussex fallout is still very much alive. The controversies surrounding Andrew haven't disappeared, they've deepened, and the outer edges of the Windsor Circle are under pressure like never before. At the same time, Sarah Ferguson finds herself in a position she's never been in, stripped of her home at Royal Lodge, cut off from the institution she once married into. Her ex-husband, the man she never stopped defending through every fresh disaster, is now facing consequences that have left her with no safe harbour, no official role, and no clear way back. Her daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, are themselves at a crossroads. Their futures within the royal framework, increasingly uncertain. And the money, as it so often has been with Fergie, remains a constant, grinding problem. Reports describe her spending extended time at an ultra-discreet wellness retreat in Switzerland, where a single stay can cost a jaw-dropping amount per night. She's been moving between borrowed villas and high-end hideaways, while those close to her say she's effectively without funds and without a permanent home. That combination, expensive habits and an empty account, is, as anyone who's followed Fergie's story over the decades will recognize, the exact recipe that makes her most unpredictable and most dangerous. When you put it all together, the isolation, the financial pressure, the feeling of having been completely abandoned by an institution she gave so much to, the picture that emerges is of a woman with very little left to lose and very much to say. That is an extraordinarily powerful combination.
David Boyes, who was Virginia Giuffre's attorney, wanted Meghan Markle to give evidence in the civil trial, saying that there were things about Andrew that she knew.
And that is further confirmation that I believe that Andrew and Meghan have crossed paths. Meghan was friends and going on holidays with Epstein's girlfriend.
And it's that combination, Fergie's desperation on one side and the Sussex's vulnerability on the other, that is now creating a moment of real tension. Because what Sarah Ferguson knows about Harry and Meghan is not nothing. It's not rumour, it's not speculation, it's not third-hand gossip that can be brushed aside. It's first-hand, witnessed, heard directly, and potentially devastating. Sarah Margaret Ferguson, Duchess of York. She has spent the better part of 4 decades in the orbit of the British royal family without ever quite belonging to it, accepted when useful, tolerated when manageable, and dropped the moment she became inconvenient. She knows how this family operates. She knows its rhythms, its hypocrisies, its private loyalties, and its very public cruelties. She sat at its table through some of the most turbulent decades in modern royal history, the wars between the Windsors, the divorces, Diana, the slow rebuilding of the monarchy, and then the new dramas, the Sussex crisis, Andrew's unravelling, the relentless pressure of a modern media landscape with zero patience for the old rules of deference and discretion. Through all of it, Fergie watched. And Fergie, whatever else you might say about her, remembers.
She's got to put something out there. She's got to put something sensational. She's got to put something in there that is going to have worldwide global news, people dissecting it, people talking about it. It's got to be truly sensational. And yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do it is to say things about Harry and Meghan.
She is not a woman known for holding back. Her 1,996 memoir, written in the raw aftermath of her divorce from Andrew, was so candid it cost her the friendship of Diana of all people. A single throwaway line about borrowing Diana's shoes was taken as a betrayal. You don't publish something that costs you Diana's friendship by accident. You publish it because you've decided, consciously, that your truth matters more than other people's comfort. That version of Fergie, the one who writes what she actually thinks, who speaks plainly, who operates on emotion rather than calculation, is exactly the version that Harry and Meghan should be worried about right now. Because the calculated, strategic Fergie, the one who protected Andrew through everything, who stayed loyal to the Queen, who kept the secrets she was trusted with, that version of Fergie required certain things to remain true. It required her to have something to protect, something to lose, and she is losing those things one by one fast.
A $20 million advance, like Harry received, is what she wants. And the people who are most terrified about this are Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Because it is Fergie, of course, who could reveal all about what really went on with this couple and the British royal family and Andrew behind the scenes.
Publishing executives have already begun circling. Major houses have approached Ferguson about a memoir. She has written or co-written more than 60 titles across her career and understands exactly how this industry works. She watched Harry do it. She watched the world respond. She knows precisely what the right story can command, and for the first time in a very long time, she is in a position to write it. The reports began surfacing quietly, the way these things always do. Whispers in publishing circles. briefings to trusted journalists. The suggestion carefully floated, carefully deniable, that Sarah Ferguson was in serious conversation with major publishers about a memoir, not another children's book, not another lifestyle title. A real, no-holds-barred account of her life inside the Windsor family. One insider source put it plainly: there is every possibility that Sarah will formalize a deal and commit her account of events to paper for a very substantial advance. And the mere prospect of that has set nerves jangling. Because once it's in print, there's no taking it back. No controlling the narrative. That phrase is the key to understanding why this moment is so significant. Controlling the narrative has always been the central project of the British royal family. The institution's survival depends on its ability to shape the story being told about it.
Harry's been brainwashed by Meghan. Who could disagree? Since they got married, he suddenly hates his country, hates his family, hates being a royal, and goes off for a very boring life in California. This is not a marriage. This is a hostage situation.
When that control slips, as it did with Diana, as it did with the Oprah interview, as it did with the wave of revelations that surrounded Andrew, the consequences are severe and lasting. A Fergie memoir written now, in these circumstances, with no palace loyalties left to honour and no career within the institution left to protect, would be perhaps the most significant threat to that narrative control in the entire Sussex era. More dangerous than Spare, more dangerous than the Netflix documentary, more dangerous even than the Oprah interview. Because Fergie is not the subject of the stories she would tell, she is the witness. And witnesses are the most dangerous kind of storyteller there is. Royal journalist Tom Sykes has been tracking this situation closely and concluded that the combination of factors Fergie now faces makes her potentially the most dangerous book looming over the royal family right now. Not another Sussex volume Fergie. And from someone who has followed this family for years, that assessment carries serious weight. Now, here's where things need to be said with precision. When people talk about what Fergie knows what she could put in a book that would cause genuine damage to Harry and Meghan, there are really two distinct categories of information, and they are not equally dangerous. The first category is what she witnessed directly during the Sussex years. The way Meghan behaved when she joined the royal family, the treatment of staff, the private dynamics that were so at odds with the carefully managed public image the Sussexes were projecting. Fergie was not on the outer circle of any of this. Harry and Meghan were closest to the Yorks of anyone in the extended royal family. They gravitated toward them a shared sense of grievance. Two branches of the family who saw themselves as operating outside the main structure, united against William and Catherine. That closeness is significant.
There's no way that you can't tell me Meghan wouldn't have got an invite through some of her friends to attend the big, lavish parties that Epstein was known for throwing, with lots of girls, some professional, some not, some models, some D-list cable TV actresses desperate for fame. So there is a good chance that Meghan does know something about Andrew, because she never said anything. Harry never said anything with all of their attacks.
It means Fergie did not hear about any of this secondhand. She was there. She saw things. She had conversations. She formed strong opinions based on direct experience, opinions that have never been made public because, until now, she had reasons to stay quiet. The second category is far more delicate. It concerns what Meghan may or may not have known about the circles she moved in before becoming a royal, the social world she inhabited during her years as an actress, the private members' clubs, the charity events, the network of extraordinarily wealthy and well-connected individuals whose names have, in recent years, become loaded with a significance nobody anticipated. And here is where the story becomes genuinely remarkable, because this is not simply speculation or inference. There is documented photographic evidence of the social circles Meghan moved in, evidence the mainstream media has largely chosen not to explore, evidence that connects people and places in ways that raise serious, as yet unanswered questions. Epstein-linked attorney David Boies is on public record stating he believed Meghan Markle had knowledge relevant to his client's case, specifically things about Andrew. He wanted her testimony. He believed she had information. That statement was made in a legal context by a serious lawyer and has never been adequately explained. It has also been almost entirely ignored by the mainstream media, which is itself as any thoughtful observer would note. Rather telling, Harry and Meghan went after almost everyone in spare. Sharp words for Charles, for Camilla, for William, for courtiers, for the British press. They left almost nobody unscathed. And yet, Andrew, a man whose public humiliation has been so total he barely functions in public life anymore, received one paragraph. One. If there was truly nothing between them, no shared history, no knowledge requiring careful handling, you'd expect them to have treated Andrew the way they treated everyone else. They didn't. And that silence is, in retrospect, deafening. Now step back from the personal and the political for a moment and consider the commercial reality, because that reality is, in its own way, just as alarming for the Sussexes. Harry's memoir reportedly commanded an advance in the region of $20 million and became, upon publication, the fastest-selling non-fiction book in recent history.
Meghan really was a force when she joined that family of just being terrible to everyone. And Fergie could, in fact, mention that. As I said, Fergie is loyal to Queen Elizabeth II, and I don't think that will change in the book. And Meghan obviously was terrible to her after everything that she gave them. So for that now to come out will again show that Harry and Meghan have lied.
Fergie's agents are doing the math right now. They're calculating what a no-holds-barred account from the mother of two princesses, the ex-wife of the most scandalized Windsor, the woman who was in the room when so much of this went down, is actually worth. And the number they've landed on? Very large indeed. Here's what people consistently get wrong about Fergie. She is not naive. She is not stumbling toward a deal she doesn't understand. She has written or co-written more than 60 titles. She has spent decades learning what publishing rewards and what it punishes. She watched Harry do it, watched the world respond, and she knows exactly what the right story commands. And right now, she is sitting on a set of circumstances, personal, financial, emotional, that make writing that story not just tempting, but completely rational. There's also the question of loyalty. For years, Fergie's silence was held in place by a form of institutional loyalty itself, supported by the practical benefits of remaining within the Windsor orbit, even at a distance, even in disgrace. There was always that faint warmth of belonging to something larger than herself. That warmth is gone. The benefits of loyalty have been withdrawn. And with them, the calculation that made silence the sensible option. None of this should surprise anyone who has followed Fergie's story across the years, because this pattern is not new. The desperation, the proximity to danger, the willingness to cross lines others consider uncrossable, this has been the defining rhythm of Sarah Ferguson's life for decades. Her 1,996 memoir was extraordinary for its time. Published in the wreckage of her marriage, it named names, described private moments, and shared things royal insiders considered deeply disloyal. It cost her Diana's friendship, perhaps the most valuable friendship she had. She published it anyway, because she needed the money, and she needed to tell her story. The calculation she made then is the same one she's making now. The variables are different, the stakes are higher, but the essential logic is identical. And then there is the shadow of Andrew's associations, which has touched the Ferguson story in ways that are only now becoming fully clear. Leaked documents, made public as part of the ongoing fallout from various releases, revealed discussions about using Beatrice and Eugenie's names and connections to help resolve a financial crisis Fergie was facing at the time.
I do believe that there is a chance that if Beatrice and Eugenie can save their bacon, as it were, by distancing themselves from their mother, they will advise her not to do something as bad and as damaging as that.
The problem is, I just don't think that there is a way back now for Eugenie and Beatrice.
The plan appears to have involved approaching wealthy individuals about funding that would effectively leverage the princess's royal status. Whether this scheme ever came to anything is unclear. What is clear is that it was discussed, that it was seriously contemplated. That context is exactly why reports of William pushing for a financial review of Beatrice and Eugenie carry such weight. It's not primarily about punishing them for their parents' choices. It's about understanding the full extent of any entanglement, because until that's understood, until there's clarity about where the money came from and what was exchanged for it, the risk to the institution remains unquantified. and unquantified risk for a monarchy trying to stabilize and rebuild is simply unacceptable. Fergie, standing at the center of all of this, knows where things are buried, figuratively speaking. She was there during the years in question. She was there during the Sussex years. She was present for private moments and private conversations that never made it into any official record. She is one of the very few people who can connect the dots across all of these different chapters of royal history, and that makes her uniquely, extraordinarily dangerous. And then there is Harry, because whatever Meghan knew or didn't know, whatever connections she may or may not have had before entering the royal family, Harry's silence on Andrew is its own story, and arguably the more significant one. Because Harry was there. Harry grew up in this family. He attended the same events, moved in the same circles, had the same access to private knowledge about his uncle's behavior that any close family member would have. He was old enough to understand what was being said, old enough to form a view. And yet, through every revelation, every press conference disaster, through the entirety of writing Spare, he chose to say almost nothing. The one paragraph he did include wasn't actually about Andrew at all. It was about Harry's own security arrangements, a complaint about institutional inconsistency, not an attempt to expose his uncle. Not an effort to hold anyone accountable. It was the move of someone who had very carefully, very deliberately decided to leave certain things unsaid. When you look at what Harry was willing to say about Charles, about Camilla, about William, about Catherine, about the British press, and then you look at what he was not willing to say about Andrew, the contrast is extraordinary. The things Harry chose to include in Spare caused real pain to real people. The thing he chose to leave out.
Something has to be done to preserve the future of the monarchy because Harry and Andrew are both massive risks, and it's a risk that needs to be assessed very quickly here. And I think definitely there could be a route forwards where their titles are stripped, and I think that's the only way to go.
Was almost certainly more dramatic than anything he put in, but it stayed out carefully, deliberately. Why? When you follow the logic, it always leads back to the same place. Mutual protection. The Yorks and the Sussexes, two branches of the family that found themselves on the outside looking in, had an arrangement, not a formal one, perhaps, but an understanding. We don't go after each other, because if we do, we might not like what comes back. And that understanding, it now appears, was the one promise neither side ever broke until now. Let's be very clear about what this mutual protection arrangement actually meant in practice, because it was not simply a matter of avoiding each other's names in interviews. It was deeper than that. It was an active, ongoing choice, made repeatedly over several years, to shield the Yorks from scrutiny at a time when that scrutiny could have been devastating. Think about the timing. The most intense period of Harry and Meghan's public campaign against the royal family, the Oprah interview, Spare, the Netflix documentary coincided almost exactly with the period during which the full scale of Andrew's situation was becoming clear. The legal settlement, the stripping of his military titles, his effective removal from public life. These were moments of maximum vulnerability for the York family, and Harry and Meghan, who had clearly shown they were willing to use maximum vulnerability as a weapon, said nothing about Andrew. Nothing material, nothing that could have made an already devastating situation significantly worse. That restraint was a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice. And choices like that don't happen without reasons. They happen when there is something to be gained from the silence, or something to be lost from speaking. The tit-for-tat dynamic observers have identified is the most persuasive explanation. If Meghan had, in her previous life, moved in circles that intersected with people whose company Andrew also kept, if there are photographs, if there are witnesses, if there are accounts of shared evenings and shared acquaintances that have never been made public, then Andrew would have had, in that knowledge, a form of quiet leverage. An unspoken arrangement: you don't go after me, I don't go after you, and everyone holds their breath, hoping the relevant files stay sealed. The files, of course, have not stayed sealed. They never do. And that is precisely why the equilibrium that has held for years is now beginning to fracture, because Fergie, the person who knows all of this, who has been present through all of it, is no longer bound by the old arrangement. She has, in the most literal sense, lost the things that were keeping her quiet.
The truth about Meghan is she will always find a way in which she thinks she can win. And the casualties are irrelevant, whether it's her father, her old best friends, her first husband. There always will be casualties in her life. The question is, when will Harry become the casualty?
One of the most persistent and painful dynamics of the Sussex years has been the gap between what Harry and Meghan said publicly about their time in the royal family and what the people who were actually their staff, courtiers, family members know to be true. That gap has never been adequately closed. Not because the alternative accounts don't exist, they do in abundance, but because the people who hold those accounts have chosen, for one reason or another, not to go public. Fergie could close that gap. Not entirely, perhaps, but significantly. She was close enough to Harry and Meghan during the royal years to have witnessed how they actually operated. The staff treatment, the demands, the way Meghan navigated the institution, or refused to navigate it on its own terms. These things were experienced by many people, reported by many journalists, but never confirmed by someone who was inside the family itself. That is the crucial distinction. When a courtier says Meghan was difficult to work for, it gets dismissed as establishment briefing. When a journalist reports it, it gets framed as a smear campaign. But when a woman who married into this family, who sat at the same Christmas table, who had her own complicated relationship with the institution and cannot easily be accused of bias, when that woman confirms what everyone has been saying for years, the dismissals become significantly harder to sustain. This is what Harry and Meghan are truly afraid of. Not gossip, not rumour, confirmation. Fergie, speaking from her own direct experience, saying, "Yes, I saw it, I was there, and what I saw confirms what you've always suspected." Fergie's accounts of how Meghan treated the Queen, the woman Fergie has consistently described with deep affection and genuine reverence, the woman whose dogs Fergie took in after her passing, would carry a moral weight that no courtier briefing or tabloid story could ever match. But there is another dimension to this story, one that is, in some ways, even more complicated than the Sussex angle. Because Sarah Ferguson's decision about whether to write this book is not just about herself. It is about her daughters, her grandchildren, and whether Beatrice and Eugenie have any future within the royal family framework, or whether that door has been permanently shut. William has made his position crystal clear. He has excluded the York princesses from Royal Ascot. He has reportedly instructed senior royals not to be photographed with them. He has requested a financial audit of their affairs, an audit that, by multiple accounts, they have declined to undergo. And he has drawn, quietly but firmly, a line around the core of the institution that does not include them. Beatrice is 36.
They know a lot about how Prince Harry and Meghan Markle behaved during their time in the British royal family. Because even though Harry and Meghan are now trying to distance themselves from the Yorks, they were closest to the Yorks out of anyone, because they loved going around to the Yorks and being able to bitch about William and Catherine and sort of act as if they were like on the outer of the family together.
Eugenie is 34. They have children of their own, husbands with careers and ambitions. They are not simply extensions of their parents' story. They are women trying to build their own lives, navigating an impossible situation they didn't entirely create and yet cannot entirely escape. Columnist Celia Walden recently made a passionate case that the York princesses are being judged unfairly, that they have never sold their stories, never published memoirs, never given hostile interviews, never embarrassed the institution in the ways their parents have, that the late Queen loved them and wanted them provided for, and that those facts should count for something. As defences go, it is a compelling one, and yet there is the question of the audit. There is the question of what those financial records might show. There is the question of business arrangements reportedly contemplated during a period of acute family financial pressure that may or may not have been acted upon. The fact that William is insisting on transparency before any reintegration tells you he has reasons that go well beyond a general desire for good governance. Fergie knows the answers to those questions. She knows what was discussed, what was decided, and what happened next. And if she writes a book, those answers, or the careful absence of them, will tell their own story, about what her daughters knew and when they knew it. And this brings us to William, because the choices being made at the center of the royal family right now, made firmly, deliberately, without sentimentality, are William's choices. He is the future. He knows it, and he is behaving accordingly. William's exclusion of the York princesses is not simply a personal decision, it is a statement of institutional policy. The standards of transparency and accountability this family demands are not negotiable. They are not subject to exemption based on family feeling or historical connection. They apply to everyone, and if you are not willing to meet them, you do not get the benefits of association with an institution working very hard to rebuild its credibility. Previous generations managed their embarrassments differently. They absorbed them, quietly shuffled people aside while maintaining the outward appearance of family unity. The Queen was a master of this. Her capacity to absorb scandal without appearing destabilized was one of the defining qualities of her long reign. William does not operate that way. He has concluded that the old approach no longer works. The only viable strategy now is radical clarity. Here is the line: meet the standard or find yourself outside it. The implications for the York family, and therefore for Fergie's calculations about her book, are stark. Because what William is effectively saying is that there is nothing left to save. The bridge is already burnt. If Fergie is hoping that restraint now will earn back some form of access or acceptance, she is hoping for something that is simply not on offer. Which means the only question remaining is what she does with the freedom that total exclusion paradoxically grants her. There is a broader truth about the Sussex story that the Fergie situation illuminates with unusual clarity, and it is this: the relationships Harry and Meghan have formed, and the relationships they have subsequently burned, reveal a consistent pattern over time. A pattern of using, discarding, and then being genuinely surprised when the people they used and discarded have things to say. Fergie is not the first person who was once close to Harry and Meghan and who now represents a potential source of damaging revelations. She is not the first person whose loyalty was taken for granted, whose discretion was assumed, and who is now, for various reasons, less bound by that loyalty than she once was. The list of people who fall into this category, who know things, who were there, who have stayed quiet for reasons that may not last forever, is longer than Harry and Meghan would be comfortable acknowledging. The pattern goes back even further before Meghan's time in the royal family, back to the friendships she maintained before Harry, to the people who were part of her life, and who, at various points, found themselves on the wrong side of her relationship with her father, with her half-siblings, with friends who were close to her during the Suits years. The consistent thread is not bad luck or misunderstanding, it is something more structural. A tendency to prioritize self-interest so completely that the well-being and dignity of the people around her becomes secondary. The Queen gave Harry and Meghan an extraordinary opportunity. She gave Meghan, specifically, something most people would consider one of the greatest honors available, a place in one of the world's oldest and most respected institutions. The chance to build a life and a legacy that would outlast any individual ambition. And what happened? By the accounts of the people who were there, Meghan found it insufficient. She wanted more than the institution was willing to give and less than it required in return. And when that tension became irresolvable, they did not leave quietly. So where does all of this leave the relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family right now? The honest answer is in a worse place than it has been at almost any point since the exit. And that is saying something. The rapprochement that some had hoped for, the gradual softening of positions, the quiet re-establishment of contact, the possibility that time and distance might eventually produce something resembling reconciliation, has not happened. If anything, the trajectory has moved in the opposite direction. William's position toward his brother has hardened. King Charles, despite his illness, despite the emotional weight of the estrangement, has found himself hemmed in by the impossible diplomatic mathematics of a situation where any outward sign of warmth toward Harry and Meghan is perceived as a betrayal of William and Catherine. The Sussexes, for their part, have not made reconciliation any easier. The brand continues. the content continues. The commercial exploitation of royal adjacency, the titles, the connections, the suggestion of insider access and insider knowledge continues. Harry has, by various accounts, expressed private yearning for a different kind of life, a quieter life, a life closer to the family he left and the country he grew up in. But wanting something privately and actually behaving in ways consistent with achieving it publicly are two very different things, and that gap between Harry's private feelings and his public behavior has been, for a long time, the defining tragedy of his story. And now, into this already complicated picture comes Fergie, a wild card. A woman with her own grievances, her own financial pressures, her own complex feelings about the family and the institution and the people within it. A woman who has been watching the Sussex saga from a position of uncomfortable proximity and who has reached a point where staying silent no longer adds up in her favour. The Sussexes know this. The palace knows this. The question of how to manage a potential Fergie memoir, how to contain it, respond to it, or get ahead of it, is not a theoretical exercise. It is an active, urgent, genuinely difficult problem. And there is no obviously right answer. Step back from the immediate drama for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because the Fergie story is not simply about one woman deciding whether to write a book. It is about the limits of silence as a strategy. It is about what happens when the people who know the most about a powerful story have nothing left to lose. And it is about the extraordinary, seemingly inexhaustible capacity of the Sussex saga to generate new threats, new complications, and new sources of potential damage, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for everyone who has ever been close to them. The Netflix situation adds another layer to this same problem. Reports have emerged that the streaming giant is considering revisiting its dramatization of royal life, not as a full returning series, but as special episodes focused on specific royal scandals. The Andrew story is understood to be at, or near, the top of that list. A high-profile dramatization, one that reaches the audiences The Crown reached, that shapes popular understanding. The way The Crown shaped understanding of Diana and Charles would be a significant cultural moment, one that neither the palace nor the Sussexes would have any meaningful control over. For millions of people, particularly younger audiences who didn't live through these events, dramatization effectively becomes history. It is how they learn what happened. An episode drawing on the publicly available record and everything that has since emerged would inevitably invite comparison between the circles that surrounded Andrew and the circles that have been documented around others' circles. That, as the evidence increasingly suggests, overlapped in ways nobody has yet been fully willing to explore in public. That loss of control, the sense that the story is no longer manageable, that the people who once held the narrative threads have lost their grip on them, is the defining anxiety of the royal family's current moment. They cannot unsay what Harry said in Spare. They cannot unshow what Netflix put out. All they can do is manage what comes next. And what comes next, if Fergie goes ahead, will be harder to manage than almost anything that has come before. Because Harry and Meghan could respond to Spare by saying the palace was briefing against them. They could respond to Netflix by saying the documentarians were sympathetic. They cannot respond to Fergie by calling her an establishment plant. She is, if anything, the establishment's most problematic estranged family member. She has no reason to protect the palace. She has no reason to protect Harry and Meghan. She is, for the first time in her public life, entirely her own agent. And that freedom, that absence of obligation, that liberation from the need to manage anyone else's interests alongside her own, is what makes her, right now, the most interesting and the most dangerous woman in the entire British royal story. Sarah Ferguson is standing at a crossroads. On one side, silence. And with it, the faint, diminishing hope that somehow, some way, there is still a path back for her daughters, her grandchildren, some version of a life connected to the institution she once married into. On the other side, the book. The big payday, the final say, the chance to tell her truth on her terms. And in doing so, to potentially confirm what so many people have suspected for so long about Harry, about Meghan, and about the hidden architecture of the Sussex years. It is, when you sit with it, An extraordinary position to be in. And the fact that Harry and Meghan's own choices, their silences, their mutual protection arrangements, their treatment of the people around them contributed directly to the circumstances now. Threatening them most is its own kind of poetic justice. So here is what I want to know if you were in Fergie's position. If you knew what she knows, if you had seen what she has seen, if you had given decades of loyalty to an institution that has now shut the door on you completely, would you stay silent? And do you think Harry and Meghan deserve the protection that silence would give them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community always brings perspectives worth hearing. If this video was worth your time, hit that like button. It makes a real difference in getting this content seen by more people. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Share this with someone who would find it just as fascinating. See you in the next one.